You're listening to Out of the Box podcast with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmetees.com. Spread love, give a hug, hugmetees.com. Guys, I am so excited to announce I will be at the LA Podfest on September 19th at 7 p.m. Tickets are $59. If you can't make it down to the Sofitel Hotel in Beverly Hills, you can check us out at lapodfest.com. There's a live stream feed and it is $25, but you get $5 off with coupon code ROSIE. That is coupon code ROSIE, ROSIE. That's my name. And check it out at lapodfest.com. And as always, we are on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Today we have an amazing member of parliament in Cambodia. She's also a human rights activist and feminist. Sochua Mu. How are you, Sochua?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. We're so excited to have you. I know that you've been doing a lot of work overseas, but you're originally an American citizen and you still have dual citizenship. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I'm visiting in Massachusetts right now, my first time.
Oh, well, welcome.
Yeah.
So how did you originally get involved in becoming an activist? Because you were originally from Cambodia and then taken away and then you returned after, I think, 20 years. Is that correct?
About 18 years, yes. Close to 20 years, yes. Mm-hmm.
So what sparked you inside of you to start, taking a stand for others?
I came here as a student when I was about 19 years old. Then I became stateless because Cambodia fell into the hands of the Khmer Rouge, and then went through genocide during a space of about 4 years that killed over 1 million people, and my parents were among the people who were killed. Then I became stateless in America. That was around 1975, 1979. And then I became a refugee in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then finally, I became a citizen of the United States in 1981 after I graduated from UC Berkeley in California. But during that entire time, I had always wanted to go back home in order to find my parents, because my sister and I left Cambodia during the war, because the war in Vietnam spread into Cambodia. And then I wanted to say goodbye to my parents and to pay my respect. Then the war took over, and then genocide, and then the country was under international embargo from 1975 until close to 1990. So I had always wanted to go back home. My desire to serve my people came from wanting to rebuild Cambodia. And finally, I got back home after almost 2 decades in exile. And when I went back home, it was very obvious that the country, the society have changed tremendously. Especially the women of Cambodia had survived an incredible journey of having to put together their lives, and because most of the men were killed. And finally, and then during the years that I went back to Cambodia, I've always been involved in addressing issues, especially women's issues, families' issues, children's issues, assisting women to put together their lives back together. And then I got involved in the struggle for democracy and got involved in politics. I've been in politics since 1995, after I returned from the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, and then have stayed in politics ever since. And this is my 4th term as a member of parliament.
And it looks like you're working really hard to make a lot of positive changes.
Right. Yeah, we have in rebuilding democracy, rebuilding a nation at war, in conflict, destroyed. We really have to take one step at a a time, and building means looking at hopes, building on hopes, and looking at the potentials of the people. And to me, I see the struggle of the women, the hard work of the women as real potentials for the reconstruction of Cambodia.
It is. And I think, a lot of people see women as the way that society is going to change because women, we're the mothers, we're the sisters, we're the core of the family.
Correct.
So a lot of times, and many men are raised by single mothers. So that's the example that they look up to.
Exactly. More than the case in Cambodia, like any country that have gone through genocide, who is left? It's mainly women, the children. The men who are usually at war are used in the army or in the fight, on the front line. So women are actually in the back, kept in behind the front line, but actually socially speaking, economically speaking, it is the women who are actually on the front line.
It is, and I think that's actually a huge positive for going forward for the future, because the young boys and the men that are growing up can see these strong women as role models, and so that's why it's so important for us to be those strong role models. But there's still a long way to go. You sent me an amazing article which I read about some of the abuse that's still going on. And it seems like the government, maybe I didn't understand the article correctly, is supporting some of these wealthy elites to abuse women. Is that correct?
It's correct. Unfortunately, after the war, after genocide, Cambodia, have not really had a real democracy, because the ruling party that actually some of the leaders, most of the top leaders of Cambodia today who are still in office, came from the communist, the Khmer Rouge.
The original corrupt dictatorships. Okay.
Exactly. Although we have gone through many elections since 1993, that was the first election sponsored by the United Nations. It was but the people wanted change, and we were through that election in 1993. The voters voted for change, and we were able to have change. And then those ruling party leaders were off power for just a short time, and they came back through a coup d'etat. And they have stayed in power ever since. So in total, the Prime Minister of Cambodia has been in power for the past 28 years.
Do you get any death threats or any threats in your life because you're fighting for the people in this type of environment?
Oh, for sure. I've, like the opposition, I used to be in government, and then I left government to join the opposition. And the opposition in Cambodia is called the Cambodia National Rescue Party. We've been fighting for almost 20 years. Fighting for what? Fighting for a real democracy, fighting for justice, fighting for values, so that we can really have rebuild based on democratic values, and family values, things that we in the old days used to take for. They are the values of family together, not just thinking about money, not thinking about just power, but thinking about families, about our religion, about our culture. Most of that have been destroyed. So what we are trying to do in the opposition is to make sure that the farmers have their land. And in the past 10 years especially, or more than half of the farmers' land, the people's land, the villagers' land, the indigenous communities have been given as economic land concessions to big companies that are closely related to the ruling party. And these companies are run by tycoons. And the case of violence against this young woman was actually the offender is a tycoon, one of the tycoons.
So let me explain to some of the listeners who might not know what we're talking about. We're talking about a young woman who was beaten by, as you said, a tycoon, and the government seems to be protecting these wealthy elites. And now I was a little confused by the story. Can they donate $100,000 towards the government and then get a title which protects them from any persecution?
Right. The title for tycoon in Cambodian language is Ok Nha. Ok Nha. Ok Nha, yes.
And you can just pay for that. You can just pay $100,000 and get that title.
Exactly. Not even 100,000. You can just pay 50,000 because these Ok Nhas are supposed to, with their money, their contribution goes toward social reconstruction of a community, for example.
It's supposed to, but it goes towards corruption.
It's supposed to. But when and is this the king, because Cambodia is a kingdom, the king with the request of the prime minister then can bestow the title of Ok Nha or tycoon to these people, rich people, who then get a title. But with the title, they can do anything they want. They can have economic land concession. They have priority to, for example, bidding for
they could just
road
beat
construction.
Anyone.
And then beating too. They can beat anyone. And they function above the law.
Are there any women that have this title, or it's all men?
Oh, women too. Women can have, and especially women who are in the business, in the private sector, because they use this Ok Nha title to have priority, to have privileges.
Wow, that sounds, really corrupt.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we in the opposition party trying to demolish. What comes first is justice. It's not about money. It's not about your title. It's about living within the law, the rule of law, the culture of nonviolence, justice, equal justice in front of the law. It's what we in the opposition party are trying to establish as the foundation for Cambodia to move forward.
What can we do? What can we do to help with this corruption? What can the people do, to move forward from this?
I think, for example, what you are doing, Rosie, and those who are listening to this conversation right now is already the first step. The first step is to be informed. For example, today you will understand how Cambodia is. You will understand, for example, the lack of rule of law, how the justice system in Cambodia functions, and who are the victims in Cambodia. That's number one. Number two is, once you've listened and once you got information, you can be more involved in these issues that we will be talking about later on, and then you can get to your constituency. You may have Cambodians in your community, or you can write a letter to your political leaders, your senators, your state representatives, and write on behalf of Cambodian, the victims of the violence in Cambodia, about corruption in Cambodia, and ask them to raise the issue in Congress, or to ask your State Department to pay attention or to put conditions to aid assistance in Cambodia, to Cambodia. The United States spends over $40 million, close to $50 billion in Cambodia. For example, I have been trying to stop the United States from training the armed forces in Cambodia, because some members of the top leaders in the armed forces in Cambodia are involved in corruption, are involved in the protection of these tycoons, are involved in deforestation in Cambodia. And why is the United States supporting the armed forces in Cambodia?
It sounds like you really want people to bring about awareness and really spread the word and get the word to the higher ups in our society that can maybe assist because, every little step, every little voice counts. And maybe some of our politicians are not aware what's going on.
Exactly, because there is a Cambodia fatigue in the American politics. Cambodia is a small country. You have had enough of Vietnam, of Cambodia. Now you're moving on to the Middle East. You're moving on to other parts of the world. Crisis is somewhere else, not in Cambodia.
But it's still there.
But it's still there. Yeah. However, the emphasis and the U.S. government interest is somewhere else. It's not that Vietnam is no longer the trend, and you have finished with that part of the world. You are moving on to the next part of the world, and that's not correct. Rebuilding democracy is a long-term process, and all involved must be held responsible, including donor countries. It's never finished.
Also, there's a lot of business interest in Cambodia, with factories and other things, and that is in the private sector, but it still affects our country. And there has been a lot in the news lately, and in the news in the past few years, because of the treatment of some of those workers. These large multinational corporations are making billions, if not trillions of dollars on the backs of some of these low-paid workers. Mm-hmm. And there have been some protests, which you're a part of, to bring about awareness to some of the wages and the conditions. How bad are the conditions?
Well, this is exactly why I joined the opposition party in Cambodia and leaving my position in the cabinet as a state minister, as a member of the government of Cambodia, because of the struggle of our workers, the trade unions. I'm very much in support of trade unions, because without unions, without mobilization, without unity, without a voice and solidarity, the workers in Cambodia, like other developing countries, will suffer from because we don't even have minimum wage. It is up to the big brands. For example, in Cambodia, in the garment sectors, it is determined by the big brands such as Gap, Nike, the Banana Republic, Walmart, you name it, Target, whatever.
So how much does an average worker get paid in Cambodia in one of these factories?
At this moment, they are getting paid about $2 a day, working 8 hours a day. And those $2 to almost $3 now comes from about over 15 years of struggle, and the struggle that I'm part of. And in January of 2014, so recently, 4 workers were killed because the workers were joined the opposition party and held a long strike. Then
to improve benefits and pay and conditions.
Yes, they wanted their wage from. At the time, it was about $65. They wanted it to go up to $160.
This is for the month.
For the month, working 8 hours a day, 6 days a week.
So that sounds very reasonable to me.
Exactly, it's not even minimum wage. It's barely enough for them to actually at the end of the month. Some of these workers are in debt because they have to pay for healthcare although for their families, because in Cambodia there is no social services that is free. It's supposed to be free, but it's not. Education, healthcare, transportation, public housing, none of that exists in Cambodia for the poor. You have to pay, and you have to struggle with whatever you make and pay corruption, pay bribes. So the workers themselves, when they work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, they can barely survive on their own. You can imagine sharing a small room with 6 other workers. So that they can save some money to take back home, to send back home to their parents in the farm. You can imagine those who have every day have to think about putting an extra spoonful of rice, saving it so that they can save money to send home. Or everything is about saving. So the result is that you have thousands of workers per year who faint because they don't eat enough. 45% of our workers, mainly women, are anemic. This is a study from ILO, from the International Labour Organization. It is very clear that our workers are not eating well enough. And for women, it can have an impact on their reproductive health. Women who are standing for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, when they are pregnant, they have to stand there. They have to force themselves to stand in order to make sure that their wages are not deducted if they take time off.
Do you think that this is a form of indentured servitude or slavery?
Of course. If you work,
you're working 8 hours a day, you're getting paid less than you can live on, and you're in debt at the end of the month.
Right.
I mean, you have no choice.
Yeah, and you put your life at risk.
So, I mean, maybe you do have the quote unquote free will to choose to work somewhere else. You know, it's not slavery in the traditional sense where you're bound in chains, but this is a form of economic slavery.
Exactly. And you're right to say quote unquote choice, because I don't think this is a choice. Who would want to have this kind of life if they really had a choice?
I say that because I think a lot of people are not aware that even though slavery as a traditional institution has been quote unquote abolished, there's other forms of slavery that still exist within our world right now. And there's been many studies that have been done that would say, according to the idea of slavery, which is that you have no choice, you're, in some type of servitude or poverty or whatever, that there's more slaves now than there's ever been in the history of the world.
Exactly. And slavery, with those who are condoning slavery, getting accepted. This is acceptable slavery.
Yes, and I want to talk about that because a lot of people, I hear a lot of people, especially in America, talking about the evils of slavery and, back in the day, 100 years ago, how were we? Look back then, look over there. And what I want to say is, no, look right here in front of us, because back then, that's done. And now let's move forward and focus on what's in front of us instead of pointing the finger 100 years ago and saying, look at slavery back then. Look. I'm saying, hey, forget about that. It's in the past. It was horrible. But what about the slavery now? And how can we make a difference going forward? Because I notice a lot of that in the American media. We recently had a lot of drama. I don't know if you were in the States, but there was some drama with the Confederate flag in America and some debate about the Confederate flag. Well, the Confederate flag represents slavery and all this. And, I was saying all through this, why are we focusing on this when there's slavery right here, right now?
Right, exactly, Rosie. If you look at you go to a store, and these big brands. I don't want to name the brands, so because there are many, and I don't, if I name
There's
one,
too many. Everyone.
yeah, yeah, and then they said the T-shirt for less than $10, less than $5. Right there is a part of like the Confederate flag, you know.
It
It's
is,
right
right?
there. It's right there. It's right there. How can
It's right
how
there. And
you can?
people don't think about it. They think, oh, $5 for a shirt. That's cheap. I'm
Yeah,
getting a deal. And they're not
yeah,
thinking, how can you make a shirt for
yeah,
$5? How can that
yeah.
happen?
Yeah, because there is, even it is on sale, it is at least 50% of it goes to benefit these brands. It
The
doesn't go
profits of these multinational corporations.
exactly,
Yeah. So,
exactly.
and that's not the only, form of slavery. That is a big one.
Mm-hmm,
I really, really want to talk about the sex trafficking because it's a big issue for me. I'm a Vietnamese American woman,
mm-hmm,
and I'm a big supporter of women. And, I have many, many male friends and some who have traveled to Southeast Asia. And there's this delusional stereotype from so many men that I meet. Not all of them. I know there's a lot of good guys out there, and I don't want to
mm-hmm.
man bash because I have a lot of amazing male friends.
Right,
But there's
right.
some men who go out there and they think, oh, these girls, they like it. They
Mm-hmm,
like being prostitutes, or they
mm-hmm.
they they choose to do this.
Yeah, they choose, they
I
choose.
hear a
Yeah,
lot of that from guys say, oh, well, they choose to do this,
yes.
and it just my brain explodes.
Exactly. And our society, our Asian society, for example, take the case of her name is Sasa. About 10 days ago, she was violently, brutally assaulted by this tycoon, this tycoon, because she stood up for her friend who would have been sexually assaulted by this tycoon because he had dragged her friend. And then Sasa stood up, but it was at a nightclub. She stood up, but the tycoon brutally assaulted her, almost ripped her clothes. She was almost naked. His bodyguard had a gun to her head. She was kicked in the face, and she was really brutally assaulted. And some of the comments from these, because the video went viral on Facebook, I read some of the comments. I was just totally appalled by these comments. Even some of the women, the comments came from women,
So what type of
saying
comments? Saying she
like
deserved it,
she
or
she deserved it. She's a bad Cambodian woman. No good Cambodian woman would hang out at the bar until 1 a.m. She
so
should.
basically she deserved,
She
because she
deserved it.
decided to go to a nightclub with her friend,
Yes.
she
Yes.
deserved to be brutally violated. I don't understand.
Yes. Exactly, exactly. That's how I think this is the same thing in America, anywhere in the world. This is the same type of mentality that society has not been able to get rid of. Is the mindset.
What I hear is a very strong judgment, and what I notice is that in society there's a very strong delusional dichotomy of women. It's a almost split personality. Either you're a good woman, kind of
Yes.
like the Virgin Mary, or you're
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene. So you can't be
Yeah.
both. And the reality is that women, we are both. We can be good and chaste and loving and giving and volunteer at our church and do things. And we can also be sexual creatures and enjoy,
Yeah.
our sexuality and enjoy spending time out and going to nightclubs. And for some reason, it's very hard for people to understand that women are whole creatures. We have both sides of us. We're not evil or good.
Exactly.
And I hear a lot of judgment towards women that are quote unquote bad women because they're at a nightclub or because they're quote unquote choosing to be prostitutes.
Mm-hmm. Right. And some societies have changed faster than others. And that's why when I went to Cambodia and became minister, which is the equivalent of Secretary of State for Women's Affairs, I changed a Cambodian proverb that says, men are gold and women are just a white piece of cloth.
Is that a real proverb?
It's a real proverb. It's a real proverb, yes. Yeah, yes.
I'm sorry to
Yeah,
laugh. That makes me
yeah,
laugh.
laugh at it. Laugh at it as much as you want.
Oh my
It is true.
gosh. That is a
But
real Cambodian proverb?
yeah, yeah. And we in Cambodia, we have the women's code.
What is it?
Right.
What have you changed it to?
I would change it to the first 2 weeks in office. That was in 1998. The first 2 weeks I took over this ministry, I changed it to men are gold, but women are precious gems.
Okay, that's a lot better.
Yeah. So, well,
I like that a lot better.
right. You want equality. You want justice. So do we as women. A white piece of cloth, if it is stained, it is stained forever. But a piece of gold, even if it is mud, it is dropped in mud, you can pick up the piece of muddy gold, you can wipe off the mud, right? And
I think maybe they were saying that women are delicate like a cloth. I don't know, but
no, I don't think so, Rosie.
I'm trying to be positive here.
Yeah, I tried to be positive, but I can't.
I like the gem because gemstones are created under an extreme amount of pressure.
Yeah.
And they're very precious. So
Yes.
that, so you show the strength and also the
Yes.
beauty, right?
Yes. Yes, and then I packed it so that the society can accept it, because the society, we want to change society. You have to get the men, the women, the religious people. You want to get the leaders as well as farmers to be on board, to understand that you are not pushing values out of the way. You are not doing a revolution. You are actually putting what is you preach as rights, as equality. How can you say your daughter is equal to your son if your daughter, let's say she is sexually assaulted, she's no longer a white piece of cloth. Mm-hmm. Then therefore she has to marry. Yeah, she's stained, and she has to marry the offender. Now, would you let your daughter marry someone who has sexually assaulted your daughter because
is that what is encouraged in society?
Yes.
Because in the view, it's the woman is tainted. She's not a virgin. She's tainted. So now she has to go with that offender. Is that
exactly?
Okay.
It's happening right now in Cambodia. So often, I come and intervene in my capacity as a member of parliament and say no. It's full prosecution.
Is the belief because she's tainted and what is the belief?
The belief that she's tainted and no one would want her, but only that man would. And that man loved her actually. If he chose her, why then would you not want to let him marry your daughter? And we have to do a lot of education, public education in this, just to change the mindset. If you value your daughter as your precious gem, she is tainted, you keep her, you continue to keep her, and in fact you have to give her more, because she is still your precious gem. And those who have tainted your precious gem, there is a law that can prosecute them.
And punish them and not reward them for the bad behavior.
Exactly. It is amazing how society can be for generations and generations, and how difficult it is to change this mindset. And but it takes courage. It takes people, especially women, to be vocal, to have and to give women a voice, so that women can come out of this darkness and say, I am tainted, but I am a human being. I am part of this society. You can't get rid of me.
So is there an encouragement for women, if they are sexually assaulted, to keep it quiet, obviously, and not go after their attackers because of the fear that they'll be, forced to be humiliated or whatever reason?
Of course, of course. And to be on the positive side, this campaign that I started in 1998, the Precious Gem.
I like it.
Precious Gem.
I love it.
Yeah, it's still a part of the government's program. This is their fourth. This is about 10 years later, 15 years later.
And this is punishing those attackers.
Yes. And that's why I was involved as a minister. I drafted, and now it's in a law, the domestic violence in Cambodia. I'm the author of the law. I got involved very actively in the sex trafficking, not in terms of to fight sex trafficking, of course. And it's not within, it's also there is an anti-human trafficking law in Cambodia. And that all came from this movement for change to accept women as precious gems.
So, how does the sex trafficking work? Are some of these girls kidnapped at a young age? Are they just coerced into it by boyfriends? I mean, how does, a nice young Cambodian girl end up in that situation?
Yeah, of course, these traffickers they have their networks, and their targets are the poor communities. And they are actually engaging the neighbors or members of the family, a distant member of the family, in tricking these young women or the parents of these young women from the rural areas into, let's say, offering them good jobs in the city. That is classic. Then once they come into the big city, they're lost. They're in the hands, they are in the networks, they're in the net.
They don't know anyone, they're away from their family.
Yeah, and they're in debt already because they would have to pay the middle person.
For traveling them or bringing them or whatever.
Yes, and then the family would owe them a favor because, we are out of poverty. We are now our daughters have good clothes and they have a job, and then they disappear. Mm-hmm. And only after sometimes they just disappear forever. They are in the networks. The women are trapped. The women are not out, cannot come out, and then they choose the sex work as their profession.
Now, when you say they're trapped, you mean they don't have physical means to get home, or do you mean that there's actually physically bodyguards bullying them to do this?
All of those things. Trapped physically, trapped economically because they can't get out of debt bondage.
They have no money to get back home or whatever.
Exactly. And also because of lack of support. If they come back home, the family no longer wants them.
And they're tainted or whatever.
Exactly. They're no longer a white piece of cloth. The society looks at them and say, you made your choice. You left your village. Khmer, in our society, a good girl does not leave the village, does not leave your family, but you left the family. And that, that stigma is also what our garments factory workers, 85% are female, they have to endure this kind of stigmatization, social stigmatization. You left your village. So you want to come back, either you come back with a lot of money or you don't come back.
So basically there's three different factors working against them. There's the cultural factor, mm-hmm. there's physical violence, mm-hmm. and there's financial pressure.
Yes.
So where can you go? How can you get out of it?
Now we have to think positive again. In the past 10 years in Cambodia, this fight of the victims, and I don't want to talk about them as victims, I consider the women who are struggling, who came out of this debt bondage from human trafficking as survivors.
Yes, absolutely. They're survivors.
Yes, or if they are victims of domestic violence, they are survivors. They
That's a more
now,
positive way to look at it.
yes,
Exactly.
right. And the reason why people know me is because I am very vocal. I use my title as Member of Parliament. I speak, I take it to the debate on the floor, and people know me as the feminist, the parliamentarian feminist. And that is also a stigmatization sometimes against me
You know
because
what?
they also,
Let me
they look,
just let me
yeah,
just say something, because a lot of times feminism, as you mentioned, has a negative connotation.
yes,
But what I
yes.
want to say is actually, for all the men listeners, because I have a lot of male fans and male listeners, what you're doing is not feminism. What you're doing is for all humanity,
It's
because
justice as well.
because men, these are the women in your life, sisters,
Yes.
mothers, cousins, girlfriends, wives. These are people that are part of your life. And if you have women in your life, which if you're a man, of course you have women in your life,
Right.
these women are being affected by this collective brutality because, we're all connected, and women, we see each other as role models, and we see each other as reflection of each other. So really, feminism, although I identify with that as a term, it's really humanism, because what you're doing is for the men too.
Exactly. Exactly. And feminism is actually, some feminists take it to the core definition of it. To me, in Cambodia, and a society that is so oppressive, we also have to bring the society along if we want to push for women's rights. Yeah, if you want to change the society in a day, it won't. Then the society comes against you. For that's why it is important to educate, to speak about the whys. Why do you want to bring women out of the home? Why do you think women should speak out? Why do you think we advocate for free healthcare? Why do we think that it is necessary to have women make their own choice in reproductive health? Yeah, it's rather than say
We need to do
women,
this.
we need to do it. So we are equal to men. So we want to do men. Then men would say, and society would say, okay, prove it to us.
You're
If they
creating
don't understand, then what?
resistance, butting
Yeah,
heads, instead of, like you said,
right,
bringing them along, getting them to understand.
right. And this the way of dealing with the injustice and the victimization of women is actually putting it in the context of in the social context society. You can't change society within a year, even in a generation. However, if you want to go beyond it, you can do research, you can do more strong advocates, and you can go right at it against society. But I don't think it can be so effective. And working with men, there is this global network for men against women, against violence against women, the white ribbon. Yeah,
Not the white cloth, the white ribbon.
the white ribbon. The global campaign is the white ribbon, and
It
we do,
is. And
yes,
there, like I said, there's a lot of good guys out there, even in America with the sexual assault. There's been many studies shown that, less than 10% of men out there are doing these sexual assaults. So,
right,
90% of men out there are, there to protect their daughters and sisters and mothers and stuff like that. So again, I don't want to go into saying that all men, it's a very small percentage
right.
of men. And I'm sure there's a lot of amazing Cambodian men out there who are joining you in your fight.
Yes, exactly. We hold this campaign they call the 16 days campaign to fight against violence against women. 16 days is a global campaign.
So how can we support the global campaign? How can we become
Oh yeah.
involved?
You can Google 16 days, the 16 days campaign. It starts from from November to until December, the 10th of December.
Every year or just this year?
Every year.
Oh, okay, great.
Every year.
So we still have time. Everyone can check it out.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, check it out. And you can organize any type of activity. It could be in your community. It could be a bumper sticker. It could be speaking out on radio. It could be among your friends. Just awareness. Yeah. And
so
then,
you're bringing awareness about the violence.
Yes. And engaging men. Engaging every single member of your society or your family so that fighting for violence against women is not just women fighting for women. The whole society,
everyone
has to stop. Yes, has to stop violence against women. It needs the whole village.
Now, I want to talk about, what exactly is violence against women, because some people think, if a woman is being punched or a woman's being attacked, it's because she did something wrong or she deserves it. And that's not true. Usually this is a power grab. Is
Right.
that correct?
Exactly.
It's some sort of assertion of power.
Yeah, exactly. Or an association of you deserve it. That's what, and you have to pay for it.
Yes.
You're not worth it.
Instead of the person who's creating the violence saying, let me work it out or let me fix the problem or find out why we're not, that's a more equitable and fair way to look at things.
And that has to start at home at a very young age. That has to start in the society, in your community. So at a very young age, if the children are exposed to a dialogue in the home, today I want pancakes. Like I just had pancakes with blueberries,
Okay.
which is great. And in the home, today we have pancakes at home. But if, for example, another member of my family say, no, I don't want pancake, I want bacon, how do you negotiate it so that everyone is happy with?
Instead of screaming and saying, no, I want bacon and throwing a pan and saying, this is what I want. Yeah.
Yeah, it is as simple as that. And you have seen parents who scream, because they think that these are children, they won't understand the importance of negotiation. It is only through screaming, because we are a parent, we can scream, we have the power, so that we can. That's the choice that you make for your own child. That's
and then
not
you
right.
teach your child screaming.
Exactly. And if it is a boy, then the boy is already born in the society. Usually gets more attention, more favors. He's served first. He's supposed to be strong. So if that from year after year and 10 years later, 20 years later, he is not rid of this kind of mentality, and the society treats and reinforces this type of thinking or behavior, then you can imagine when that boy becomes an adolescent, male adolescent, an adult, a man, and a situation where he can use the power and he has no other way, he has not known any other way to negotiate for what he wants, but to scream and to use his power, then he will use his power.
He doesn't, not being taught the emotional intelligence that there's other ways to communicate other than asserting authority.
Exactly.
So negotiation, compromise, maybe, talking things out or talking out frustrations. There's only one way. And for some reason, in a lot of societies, including American society, anger is a very acceptable emotion for men.
Mm-hmm.
And vulnerability, tenderness, all these other emotions that are part of the human spectrum, which is part of being a human being, are not encouraged in men. And I think that is something that's very, very negative, because in America, we just had another shooting recently, unfortunately, a
Yes.
mass shooting, and we've had
Yes.
many of them in the past 5-10 years. And so we see that men are suffering actually by learning to communicate through aggression and violence because these men are suffering. They're mentally suffering.
Yeah.
So it's not just the women who are victims or survivors of this violence. The men are suffering because if you're communicating through violence, you're not a happy person.
Exactly. And the happy home starts when there is a way to communicate and to deal with conflicts without having to without using violence or something that can encourage violence. For example, gun at home. You don't keep, if you have a gun, you don't keep it in your garden, or you don't keep you want to keep it inside the home so that it's the first thing you can use when you feel threatened. That's why having a gun is not a way to to protect yourself. I know that this is a very heated debate, a controversial issue, but I think at the end of the day, I think that if you have a gun next to you, you will use that gun.
It's an option. It's
an
definitely
option.
an option.
Right. You may think it is. You may feel that it's for your own protection, but at the end, it is. Yeah, there are cases where because you have a gun, you are alive. Yes, of course. But most of the time is not the case.
And people, many people use it in domestic violence, and there's children that have accidents and they go off. But I think it's important to understand for men that violence is a form of suffering also for them. That's fairly important because a lot of times we focus on the woman, which is also important that the woman is being affected by the violence. But men who are using violence, they're emotionally frustrated. It's very important to know that men are also a victim of their own lack of understanding of their communication, so that we don't just say, well, women are victims. Yes, we are victims, but the men are suffering too. And that is the reason why it's important to learn conflict resolution, nonviolent communication, and to support women because, the men are also suffering when women don't get those fair rights.
Exactly. And I want to go beyond the physical violence, Rosie. Violence against women is not just physical.
It can be emotional as well.
Emotional, go day after day, treating you, saying words that hurts or that totally traumatizes you.
Insults, treating you like a white cloth.
Exactly.
A dirty white cloth.
Yeah, very dirty. Yes. It can be economic. For example, destroying your income or stopping you from going to work. That is economic. And psychological, emotional.
Those and actually can be more damaging because when your mindset is altered into a victim mentality or fear mentality, you go into fight or flight mode, and you can very easily be manipulated.
Yes.
And it sounds like there's a lot of psychological and monetary abuse with what we were talking about with the workers and the trafficking.
Exactly. And when I introduced those terms in the law, the law against domestic violence in Cambodia, these terms as sexual violence, marital rape, economic violence, even the members.
That's a big one. Marital rape is a big one because a lot of people do not believe that you can be sexually assaulted by your husband.
Exactly. So in the debate in Parliament, they made us, authors of this law, take that word out. We said no. Sexual
So they were
violence,
debating it with you.
Yes. Marital rape means, okay, what is rape? Then I said, what is rape? Something, a physical, you are doing something against your will. You are made to do it. And you can be made to do it inside the home as well as outside the home. So if it is inside the home by your husband, then or your partner, then is marital rape.
If anything, it seems like the chances of marital rape would be higher than a stranger raping you.
Exactly.
Because there's easy access, you're there, maybe you're in a domestic situation, a violent situation.
And then as a spouse, as a wife, you say, how can I not accept it? I am the wife, right? So the term of the economic violence against women, that's also a new term. We had to explain that during the debate.
And you were successful, and it's now part of the law.
Yeah, it's part of the law. It was passed in 2009. So the reason why it is important to think out of the box is that in order for us to reconstruct a country, a nation, a society that has been so devastated by conflict, by genocide, this is a trauma, is a disaster, but it presents all forms of opportunities as well. And you have to seize these opportunities, this moment. For example, the passing of a law, adoption of a law, is an opportunity so that you don't go back. If you reconstruct the country and you go back to the same old values, then why should you? That is values that are damaging to the population, and especially to the women who represent more than half of the country.
It is. And when these values are denigrated and destroyed, it's easy for other nations even to come in, like you said, with these large national corporations, multinational corporations, and abuse the people because they're destroyed as the fabric of the country is destroyed. So
exactly,
it's very important. We have to wrap up soon, and I'm very sad because I would like to keep going. But what are some ways that the listeners can move forward? I know you talked about, bringing awareness with the White Ribbon, the Violence Against Women campaign, and also writing to our constituency and also bringing awareness. Are there any other way? I know a lot of Westerners travel to Cambodia and Southeast Asia. Is there anything that visitors can do to support? Is there anything we can do online that can support?
I am putting together this program called 1,000 Lights for Women, for women to enter politics at the local level. And I am looking for funding, $1,000 from now to 2017 to train a woman at the local level to get engaged and to run for office at the local level. It's called 1,000 Lights for Women.
And where can people donate?
At my blog and
what is the address?
Sochua SOCHUA.com. .com or .com. Yeah.
We will have a link to that on our website, outoftheboxpodcast.com, for those of you who would like to donate. And how can people find you on Facebook or Twitter?
Sochua, SOCHUAMU. On Facebook.
Okay. Yeah. And she has the page on there, and she's got tons of supporters, so you can check her out on Facebook or Twitter and follow her and donate towards her women in politics, and hopefully, that will make a change. We actually need something like that here in America. We don't have enough women in politics.
Yes, I'm raising money for 250 women for 2017 local election.
Okay, well, I'm jealous because that sounds like we need that over here. We have way too many men that are not representing the people, men and women. So we're having a little political revolution over here, actually. We'll see what happens in the next presidential election. But thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you, Rosie.
This has been Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran. Check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. And of course, don't forget September 19th in Beverly Hills, California. We will be at LA Podfest. If you cannot make it, then go to lapodfest.com and click on the live stream. It's $25, but $5 off with coupon code Rosie. That is coupon code Rosie, my name, Rosie, and you will be able to catch not only Out of the Box, but all the podcasts that weekend. If you are able to make it to Beverly Hills, then we will be there. The tickets are $59 for the Saturday show, which I will be on. As always, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, visit our sponsor, hugmetees.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Funny Rosie. This has been Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran.